Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What happens when a titan of the silver screen enters the gladiatorial arena of daytime television, only to systematically dismantle one of its most ferocious combatants? Today, we chronicle the legendary confrontation that left Joy Behar so utterly disarmed. She was forced into a retreat from which her on-air authority would never fully recover. This was no mere celebrity spat. This was the moment Tom Hardy's surgical intellect met Joy's barrage of interruptions. And the fallout was nothing short of catastrophic. But before we dissect this masterclass in verbal warfare, ensure you are subscribed for more tales of giants clashing. And declare in the comments below, what is the fate of those who challenge the unchallengeable now? Let us set the stage for the fateful collision of these two formidable forces. The studio lights burned with the heat of a Coliseum sun that Tuesday morning. As Tom Hardy took his place in the designated chair on the View's battlefield, the revered British actor, a man forged in the crucible of intense roles from Mad Max to The Dark Knight Rises, had come for a routine promotional tour. No one, not the audience, not the producers, could have foreseen that this perfunctory appearance was destined to become a legend. Joy Behar, enthroned in her usual seat, possessed a familiar glint in her eye, a look the faithful audience recognized as the prelude to an ambush. She had spent days gathering her ammunition on Hardy, excavating old interviews and controversial statements, preparing an arsenal she believed would guarantee another signature takedown. A palpable tension settled over the panel. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the others could feel the change in the air, a silent prelude to the storm, even before the broadcast began. And so, the battle commences. Joy launches the first volley with the condescending smile she reserves for subjects she intends to dissect. Let's talk about your comments regarding method acting. You've said some pretty intense things about how far actors should go for their craft. Don't you think? She presses. That's just a fancy way of saying actors should be allowed to behave badly. Hardy leans back, almost imperceptibly, his piercing blue eyes assessing Joy with the same unnerving focus he brings to a role. A pause hangs in the air, a silence so profound the entire studio holds its breath. He then deploys his counterattack, his voice a low gravel. Well, Joy, I believe there is a vast difference between commitment to a craft and simply behaving badly. Though I suspect, he adds, the words, landing with pinpoint accuracy. You might not perceive the distinction. Method acting is an exercise in discipline, in research, in profound respect for the process. It is not, as you suggest, a shield for tantrums or an excuse for poor behavior. The other panelists exchanged nervous glances across the table. This was not the standard deferential celebrity interview. Hardy had not just deflected Joy's loaded question, he had returned it with interest. And everyone felt the tectonic plates of the conversation shift. Joy's smile flickers. A momentary loss of composure. Before she reloads and doubles down, her voice now sharpens to the cutting edge that made her a legend in confrontational television. Oh, please. Tom? She scoffs. We have all heard the tales of actors who hide behind being in character when they are, in reality, just being insufferable. Surely you can concede that some of this method acting business is nothing but pretentious nonsense. Pretentious nonsense, Hardy repeats, his voice calm, his accent lending each syllable a deliberate, surgical weight. That is a fascinating diagnosis, coming from an individual who has built a career offering verdicts on professions they have never practiced. Tell me, Joy, what is your formal training in the dramatic arts? What gives you the authority to so easily dismiss techniques that have served actors for generations? A dead silence descends upon the studio, broken only by the quiet whir of the cameras. A flush of crimson rises on Joy's face. She was utterly unprepared to have her own credentials placed under interrogation. She was the inquisitor, never the subject. I've been in this business for over 20 years. Joy retorts, her voice climbing in pitch, a clear signal of distress. I think I know a thing or two about what is genuine and what is merely actors being self-indulgent. 20 years of what? Precisely, Hardy inquires. His tone, one of sincere curiosity, which only makes the question more devastating. 20 years of observing from behind a desk, offering commentary, because unless I am profoundly mistaken, your own experience in performance is, shall we say, quite limited. Is it not? You have done stand-up? You have hosted. But you have never been tasked with the complete dissolution of self for a role. Have you? Whoopi makes a move to intervene, sensing the confrontation had breached containment. Now, let's not. But Joy, her pride grievously wounded, cuts her off. I don't need to have climbed Mount Everest to know that it is tall, Tom. And I don't need to be a method actor to spot when someone is using it as an excuse. Hardy's expression remains a mask of tranquility, but his composure has now taken on a predatory stillness. He is the grandmaster who has just watched his opponent walk directly into a fatal trap. That is, in fact, the perfect analogy, he says, his voice dangerously soft. You are correct. Joy. You don't need to climb Everest to know its height, but you would need to be a mountaineer to critique a climber's technique. Would you not? You would need a deep understanding of rope work, of oxygen systems, of weather patterns. You would need actual, hard-won expertise, not merely an opinion from the base camp. Are you suggesting I am not qualified to have opinions? Joy demands. Her voice now frayed with agitation. Not at all. Hardy replies. The word, a silken blade. You are eminently qualified to possess opinions. However, there is a chasm between holding a personal opinion and issuing authoritative judgments on professional disciplines in which you have never participated. Surely, he concludes, a veteran of the media such as yourself can appreciate that distinction. The other hosts are now in open distress. Sarah Haynes shuffles her notes aimlessly while Whoopi telegraphs desperate pleas to the producers off camera. The interview has shattered its script, and Joy has lost all command of the battlefield. You know what? Tom, she says, her voice lacquered with a bitter sarcasm. I think you are proving my point perfectly. All of this intellectual posturing, she sneers. This overwhelming need to sound so profound and important. That is precisely the pretension I am talking about when I condemn method acting. Hardy tilts his head. And for the first time in this duel, a smile touches his lips. It is not a smile of warmth. It is the smile of a victor who has just been handed the enemy's sword. Intellectual posturing. He repeats quietly. Joy. I have answered every one of your questions with directness and with honesty. I have engaged your criticisms with consideration. If that is what you perceive as pretentious, then I suggest that says far more about your own comfort with substantive discourse than it could ever say about my character. The words detonate in the studio. The silence that follows thick with fallout. Joy's mouth works. A fish gasping for air. Searching for a counterattack. But for what may be the first time in her televised reign. She is utterly disarmed. Hardy presses his advantage. His voice a calm, steady blade. You inquired about my method. I provided an explanation. You contested that explanation. And I, in turn, questioned the foundation of your challenge. You labeled my reply pretentious. And now, he concludes, I am merely observing that to dismiss a thoughtful exchange as pretentious may reveal more about one's own intellectual arsenal than anyone else's. At what juncture in this engagement have I been anything but direct and respectful? The camera operators, like seasoned war photographers, zoom in, capturing every flicker of Joy's crumbling facade. Her legendary confidence has bled out, replaced by the stark terror of a general watching her army collapse. This is absurd. Joy stammers. The words, a desperate retreat. I am simply attempting to conduct a normal conversation. Are you Hardy Parries? A single eyebrow, arched like a drawn bow. Because from my position, it appears you arrived on this battlefield with a pre-written history of the victor. Your objective was to brand method acting as indulgent folly. And when I presented a counter-narrative, you rejected it without ever engaging the substance of the argument. That is not a dialogue. Joy. That is a tribunal where the verdict was decided before the trial began. The dead silence stretches. A chasm between them. Joy's face cycles through shades of crimson, and the omniscient eye can see her mind racing, scrambling for a strategy to reclaim the narrative. The other hosts shrink into their chairs, wishing for invisibility. Listen, I believe we're straying from the path. Whoopi finally ventures, a peace offering in a war zone. But Hardy is not finished. On the contrary, I believe we are precisely on the path. He states, his gaze shifting to Whoopi for a moment before locking back onto Joy. Joy posed a question about method acting. One assumes because she desired a discussion. My only aim is to comprehend her immediate hostility to the idea. Given her lack of practical experience in the craft, Joy's jaw sets like concrete. She is unaccustomed to being the subject of analysis on her own stage, and the raw discomfort radiates from her. I am not hostile to anything. I just believe certain actors use it as a license to be difficult, and some actors likely do. Hardy concedes with disarming calm. Just as some television hosts likely use their platform as a cudgel against those they dislike, rather than fostering genuine discourse. Should we then condemn all hosts by the actions of the worst? The counterattack lands with the force of a siege engine? Joy's eyes widen. A flicker of pure shock that he would turn her own logic against her with such devastating efficiency. That is entirely different. She protests. But her voice is a hollow echo. Is it Hardy? Inquires. His tone, one of authentic curiosity? You propose we judge an entire artistic discipline by its most flawed practitioners. I am suggesting we apply the same standard to television hosting. What principle makes one critique valid and the other forbidden? Sarah Haynes attempts an intervention. Perhaps we could discuss the new film. But Joy, unable to let the challenge stand, cuts her off. You are twisting my words. Tom, I never suggested we judge all method actors by the few. Hardy's expression is one of infinite patience. Yet his tone is now almost Socratic. That of a teacher correcting a pupil who has fundamentally misunderstood the text. Actually, Joy, your precise words were that method acting is pretentious nonsense and an excuse to behave badly. That strikes me as a generalization of the broadest order. Would you like me to ask the producers to roll the tape? The offer to replay her own indictment hangs in the air. A public executioner's blade. She shifts, her unease palpable. The realization dawning that millions are witnessing this vivisection. I believe you are being intentionally obtuse. Joy says, her voice, now, a brittle shield of defensiveness. Obtuse. Hardy repeats the word. A hint of amusement coloring his tone. Joy. I have been nothing if not direct. You made an assertion. I questioned that assertion. You attacked my question. And I noted how that attack might be perceived. Which part of that logical sequence strikes you as obtuse? Joy is in a free fall. Her standard arsenal, the interruptions, the deflections, the ad hominem strikes is useless against an opponent who refuses to be baited, who insists on following every thread of logic to its inexorable end. You're just playing word games, she accuses. And the weakness of the charge is plain to all. Word games. Hardy's eyebrows climb higher. Joy. Words are the very currency of ideas. If you find yourself uncomfortable with their precise application, perhaps this medium is not your natural habitat. The implication that a veteran host is unfit for television is a catastrophic blow. Gasps are audible from the other hosts. Off camera, the production crew signals in frantic, silent panic. Joy's face drains of color, then floods with a furious red. How dare you? How dare you imply I don't belong here? I have been a titan of this industry longer than you have been a professional actor. Have you? Though Hardy asks. And the simple, quiet question lands with more force than a shouted accusation. I mean, what is the metric for success? Because from this vantage point, your entire methodology seems engineered to generate heat, not light. You deploy loaded questions, you silence thoughtful answers with interruptions, and you attack your guests for failing to follow your script? Is that success, or is that merely performance art? The surgical precision of the diagnosis is breathtaking. Every viewer recognizes the truth in his description of her style. And the fact that he is proving his thesis in real time makes the moment immortal? I ask probing questions. That is the work of a journalist. Joy fires back, her voice now trembling with rage. Journalists. Hardy's tone is still calm, but the word hangs between them. An indictment. Joy, when was the last story you broke? When was your last piece of investigative reporting? When did you last do anything other than broadcast your opinion on the work of others? For what the world was witnessing was not the craft of journalism. It was the spectacle of a professional provocateur. One who had forged a career from confrontation, now attempting to ambush a man who refused to be drawn into the fray. The chasm between reporting and punditry had been laid bare for all to see. And with surgical precision, Hardy had just positioned Joy firmly in the latter camp, all while she desperately clung to the credibility of the former. Whoopi, sensing the impending collapse, made one final attempt to call for a ceasefire. Tom, perhaps we should. But Joy was beyond the point of rescue. Her hubris was shattered. Her professional authority had been publicly challenged. And now she faced the agonizing, slow-motion catastrophe of losing a battle on her own turf, before an audience of millions. You know what Joy declared? Her voice climbing in pitch and volume. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some actor who fancies himself an intellectual. Actually, Hardy countered, his voice a quiet blade. You do have to sit there. This is your program. I am your guest. You invited me onto this stage, presumably to speak about my work. And now you are incensed that I refuse to perform the part you cast for me in your script. But here is the reality. Joy, I am not an actor in your drama. This is a dialogue between two adults. And if you are incapable of handling that, perhaps the issue does not lie with me. The words landed with the finality of a knockout blow. Joy sat perfectly still, a statue of disbelief. She was visibly calculating the damage, realizing she had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered by an opponent who never raised his voice, never strayed from decorum, and never ceased treating her as a professional, even as he systematically dismantled her entire offensive. This is unbelievable, she whispered. The words meant more for herself than for anyone in the studio. What precisely is unbelievable? Hardy inquired, pressing his advantage. That someone has disagreed with you, that someone has asked you to substantiate your claims instead of merely accepting them, that someone treated your inquiries with enough gravity to provide honest answers instead of rehearsed platitudes. Which of these truths? Exactly. Do you find so difficult to believe? Joy's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But no sound emerged. For a woman who had built an empire on the foundation of always having a retort, the dead silence was an indictment. Hardy leaned forward, his voice softening to an almost gentle register. Joy, my purpose here was to discuss my work. You chose to pivot this into an assault on method acting. You did this, one assumes, because you believed it would create compelling television. But when I met your critique with a serious defense, you became agitated. The question you must now pose to yourself is this: do you genuinely wish to engage in conversation? Or do you merely wish to perform outrage for the sake of ratings? The question hung in the charged air. a challenge that echoed in the silent studio. Joy stared at Hardy, her breathing shallow and rapid. She was wrestling with the stark realization that she possessed no credible answer. The phrase "perform outrage for ratings" had struck the very core of her professional identity. And every single person on that set knew the blow had landed true. "That's not," Joy began, her voice faltering into silence. "I don't perform anything. I offer my sincere opinions." "Do you, though?" Hardy asked, his tone now laced with a sympathy that, for Joy, was more scalding than his criticism. "Because it appears to me that you entered this exchange with a predetermined script attack method acting. Force me onto the defensive. Manufacture some conflict for the evening's highlight reel. But when I deviated from your narrative, when I chose to address your questions with genuine substance, you grew frustrated. That suggests to me that the dialogue itself was never the objective." Joy's hands were now trembling in plain sight. She cast a desperate look around the table, searching for an ally, but her co-hosts were suddenly absorbed in their notes, their gazes fixed downward. Even Whoopi, who was typically the first to rush to a colleague's defense, now studied her papers with an uncharacteristic intensity. "I ask the questions that our viewers demand answers to," Joy stated, her voice a weak echo of its usual force. "Do they, though?" Hardy pressed, gently but relentlessly. "Do viewers truly wish to see you berate your guests, or do you simply operate on the assumption that conflict drives viewership? Because from my vantage point, this feels neither like journalism nor entertainment. It feels unmistakably like bullying." The word bullying struck Joy with the force of a physical impact. The color drained from her face, and for a long moment, she looked utterly and completely stunned. No one had ever dared to label her a bully on her own broadcast, and the terrible accuracy of the term was visibly devastating. "I am not a bully," she whispered, but the denial lacked any conviction. "Are you not?" Hardy continued calmly, laying out the evidence like a prosecutor. "You leverage your platform to assail individuals who cannot truly retaliate without appearing unprofessional. You cut them off when they attempt to articulate their position. You dismiss their arguments without affording them the courtesy of listening. You resort to personal insults when your own logic begins to crumble. What would you call that pattern of behavior if you observed it in any other context?" Joy's breathing grew more ragged. She was in the throes of a visible panic attack as the full, crushing weight of Hardy's assessment settled upon her. Every point he made was true, and she knew it. Worse still, millions of people were watching her have this realization in real time. "This is my show," she said, a desperate grasp for authority. "I have a right to ask difficult questions." "Absolutely," Hardy conceded instantly. "You have every right to ask difficult questions. But I, in turn, have the right to provide you with difficult answers. And your guests have the right to be treated with a baseline of respect, even in disagreement. The issue has never been that you ask hard questions, Joy. The issue is that you seem to believe asking them absolves you from ever having to answer any." Sarah Haynes made a final, futile gesture to stop the bleeding. "Perhaps we should cut to a commercial." But Joy was beyond being saved now. A fundamental structure had fractured within her. The meticulously built wall separating her public persona from her private insecurities had been breached. "No," she insisted, her voice cracking under the strain. "No. I want to see this through. Tom, you sit there so smug, so superior. But you have no idea what it's like. Working in this business as a woman? You don't know the things I've had to endure just to survive." For the first time, Hardy's expression genuinely softened with something other than tactical calm. "You are absolutely correct. I do not know what that is like. And I am not attempting to invalidate the very real struggles you have faced. But Joy, none of that can ever serve as a justification for treating other people with cruelty. Being a woman in a hostile industry is a reason to demand better standards, not a license to abandon them." The unexpected compassion in his voice seemed to shatter what little remained of Joy's composure. Tears welled in her eyes, her professional mask finally dissolving completely. "You don't understand," she said. And now, all that remained was the sound of exhaustion and defeat. If I'm not the aggressive one, if I'm not the one driving the hard questions, then what am I? What is my purpose? That, Hardy replied gently, is precisely the wrong question to be asking. Your strength was never in the ambush, the confrontation, the on-air skirmish. Your true value was in your curiosity, in guiding the audience through complexity, in forging a space for real dialogue. But that arsenal is useless if you're more committed to performing conflict than to pursuing conversation. And there it was. The final volley had landed. Joy's composure shattered, tears streaming freely as the unblinking eyes of the cameras recorded her fall. Her co-hosts, the Greek chorus to this tragedy, watched in abject horror. They were witnessing the live television demolition of a colleague's entire professional identity. "I can't do this anymore." Joy's voice cracks. The words, a surrender. She rises from the table. A physical concession of defeat. "I cannot sit here and pretend this is working. It's not." "Tom, you're right. You are right about every last word. And I despise that you're right. And I despise that you forced me to see it. And I despise that I have built an entire career on a foundation that I am, apparently, not very good at holding." The studio was plunged into a dead silence. The air thick and heavy, broken only by the sharp click of Joy removing her microphone. Hardy began to rise, a gesture of truce. But Joy raised a hand, halting his advance. "Don't," she commanded. "Don't you dare try to soften this blow. Don't try to be kind about it. You came here to promote your work. And instead, you've held up a mirror to me and to everyone watching, showing the world who I truly am. And the most brutal part, you did it without an ounce of cruelty. You won by simply refusing to play my game." She turns, facing the camera head-on, her makeup a casualty of war, streaked by tears. Yet her voice finds a new, chilling stability. "You know what? Viewers, Tom is right. I have been performing rage for ratings. I have been treating my guests not as people with something to offer, but as props in my own personal drama. And I am exhausted by it. I am exhausted by being the person who launches an attack on anyone who offers a thoughtful response to a legitimate question." Hardy remained standing, a statue of conflict, caught between the impulse to console her and the duty to respect her space. "Joy, you don't have to." "Oh, yes, I do." She cuts him off, her voice sharp as glass. "Because this is the first moment of truth I've experienced on this show in years, and it required a guest to dismantle my defenses to make it happen. Is that journalism? Is that good television? No. That is simply pathetic." She scans the faces of her co-hosts, then locks eyes with the camera once more. "I built a fortress around my career, brick by brick, on being the tough interrogator, the one who let no one escape. But somewhere in the battle, I forgot that the purpose of deploying tough questions is to secure valuable answers, not just to generate chaos for the spectacle." And Tom just spent the last 20 minutes demonstrating what that actually looks like. "Whoopee." Finding her voice at last, pleaded Joy. "Perhaps we should take this off camera." "Absolutely not. Whoopee. I am finished with off-camera discussions. I am finished with the performance. I am finished pretending that confrontation is a synonym for courage." Joy turned back to Hardy, her vanquisher. "Thank you for showing me the monster I had become. I don't like it, but I needed to see it." Hardy gave a slow, respectful nod. "For what it's worth, I think seeing it is the first step to changing it." "Perhaps," Joy conceded, "but I cannot change it here. Not in this arena. Not under these rules of engagement." Not with this caricature of myself that everyone tunes in to see. I have to discover who I truly am before I can ever be that person on television. And with that final declaration, she turned and walked off the set, leaving a battlefield of silence in her wake. Her co-hosts, her guest, and millions of viewers were left in the wreckage, suspended in stunned silence. Hardy slowly lowered himself back into his chair, the victor looking genuinely shaken by the totality of his win. "Well," Whoopi said into the void, "I guess we should go to a commercial." As the red lights on, the cameras blinked off. Hardy sat for a moment, then looked at the remaining hosts, his voice low. "I hope she is okay," he said, the words heavy with sincerity. That took a profound kind of courage. And that is the story of how one of television's most feared gladiators left the arena for good, brought down not by a network scandal or a public controversy, but by a quiet man who simply refused to be her sparring partner. It seems, in the end, the most devastating counterattack against a person who has built an empire on performing anger is to treat them with the very respect and honesty they have forgotten how to wield themselves. So, what is your verdict? Did Joy meet a fate she deserved? Or should a guest on any show be expected to play along with the spectacle? Cast your judgment in the comments below.